On a quiet street corner in West Baltimore, a black man in his early 50s stood in front of a boarded-up brick church. The front steps were cracked. The stained glass windows were covered in plywood that had warped from years of rain. A maple tree had pushed its roots through the side of the foundation, splitting the brick like an old scar. Pigeons lived in the bell tower. The roof over the back wing had partially caved in 2 winters ago, and nobody had touched it since. The city wanted $200 for the property. $200 for a building that had been condemned for almost a decade. A real estate agent had told the city it was worth less than the cost of demolition. The paperwork was already drawn up to tear it down at the end of the year. The man pulled a small bank envelope out of the inside pocket of his coat. He counted the money on the cold concrete of the church steps: 20s, 10s, a few 5s, and a single $50 bill folded twice. He counted it 3 times because his hands were shaking. $218. Everything he had saved for almost 2 years. The city worker who met him there was a woman in her late 40s named Denise. She watched him count it and did not say anything. When he handed her the money, she took the $200 and slid the $18 back into his hand. She told him to use it for a bus pass. She told him the church was his. His name is Marcus Whitfield. What he did with that abandoned church over the next 16 months changed the lives of more than 40 people. But to understand why this moment mattered so much, you have to understand where Marcus was standing before he stood on those steps. For almost 4 years, Marcus had been homeless in Baltimore. He slept in a different place every few nights, sometimes the steam tunnels near the train station when it got cold, sometimes a wooded patch behind a Home Depot off Pulaski Highway, sometimes a 24-hour laundromat where the night manager let him sit in the back as long as he kept to himself and bought a coffee every few hours. He carried his life in a black duffel bag with a broken zipper that he had repaired with safety pins. Inside were 2 changes of clothes, a thermos, a small leather Bible his grandmother had given him when he was 9 years old, and a folder of paperwork wrapped in a freezer bag. The paperwork was everything that proved who he was: birth certificate, social security card, the discharge papers from his last job. He had learned the hard way that without paperwork, you do not exist. Marcus had not always been homeless. He had spent 22 years working as a maintenance supervisor for the Baltimore City public school system. He could fix anything: boilers, electrical panels, plumbing, HVAC, roofing, brickwork. He had keys to 14 different school buildings. He trained new hires. He showed up at 5 in the morning to make sure the heat was on before the kids arrived. He loved that job the way some people love their families. His wife passed away from cancer the same year his oldest daughter moved to Atlanta for college. 3 months later, Marcus had a stroke at work. He was 47 years old. He recovered most of his physical ability, but not all of it. His left hand still trembled when he was tired. The city offered him a desk position. He turned it down. He said he was a man who worked with his hands, or he was not a worker at all. This was his loss and his code of labor. The disability checks were not enough to cover the mortgage. The savings disappeared in a year. The house went into foreclosure. His daughter offered to fly him to Atlanta, but Marcus said no. He said Baltimore was where his wife was buried, and he was not going to leave her. So he stayed, and he ran out of money. And one night in October, he packed a duffel bag and walked out of the only home he had ever owned. He chose the streets over a shelter to keep his family and his dignity. Marcus chose the streets over a shelter because the shelter separated families and possessions and dignity. He had spent 2 nights in one shelter in his first month and watched a man get robbed of his shoes while he slept. He never went back. He decided that if he was going to be homeless, he was going to do it on his own terms, and he was going to keep saving every dollar he could until he had a plan. He was building a quiet plan. That envelope of money is what he counted on the church steps. He had saved it in $5 and $10 increments from day labor jobs, construction cleanup, moving help, snow shoveling in the winter, and yard work in the summer. He kept the money in a sealed envelope hidden inside the cover of his grandmother's Bible. He never told anyone he was saving. He was not sure himself in the beginning what he was saving for. But Marcus had walked past that boarded-up church almost every week for 3 years. It sat on a corner he passed on his way to the day labor pickup spot. And one freezing morning in February, while he was waiting for a contractor who never showed, Marcus looked across the street at the boarded-up church and saw something nobody else had seen in a decade. He saw a building that wanted to be useful again. The first night, Marcus slept inside the church. The front door did not have a lock. He had to wedge a 2x4 against the inside of it to keep it shut. There was no power, no water, no heat. Snow had drifted into the sanctuary through a hole in the roof and built up against the back wall in a small white slope. He laid out his sleeping bag in the corner of what used to be the choir loft, because it was the only spot dry enough to lie down. He stared up at the broken stained glass and listened to the pigeons shuffling in the bell tower. He thought about his wife. He thought about his daughter. He thought about every step that had brought him to a freezing church in the middle of West Baltimore with $18 in his pocket and a building that was technically his. He did not sleep at all that first night. But somewhere around 4 in the morning, he made a decision. He was not going to be the man who slept in a broken church. He was going to fix the church. And when he was done, he was going to fill it with people who needed somewhere to be. He had no money, no materials, no crew, no permits. What he had was 22 years of fixing public buildings, a duffel bag of tools he had managed to keep through everything, and a city worker named Denise, who had told him to call her if he needed anything. The first month was clearing. Marcus pulled 3 years of trash out of the sanctuary. Old bottles, newspapers, a torn mattress somebody had dragged in, the remains of a pigeon nest that had collapsed from the bell tower. He swept every floor down to the bare wood. He scrubbed the walls with bleach and water from a 5-gallon jug he hauled from a gas station 4 blocks away. He pulled the warped plywood off the windows and stacked it neatly in the back lot to use later. The first time sunlight came through the cracked stained glass and hit the sanctuary floor, Marcus sat down in the front pew and cried for almost an hour. Then he got up and kept working. The second month was the roof. This was the part that scared him most. The back wing had caved in, and water had been getting into the building for years. Marcus walked Baltimore looking for roofing material. He found a contractor doing a re-roof on a row house in Fells Point and offered to clean up the entire job site for free in exchange for the leftover shingles and underlayment. The contractor was a man named Ray, and Ray told him to take whatever he needed. Then Ray showed up the next Saturday at the church with 2 of his crew and helped Marcus patch the entire back wing. They worked from sunrise to sundown. Marcus offered to pay them with the $18 he had left. Ray laughed and told him to put that away. The third month was windows. Marcus could not afford new glass, but he could afford patience. He posted flyers at 3 local hardware stores, asking if anyone was throwing out old windows from a renovation. Within 2 weeks, he had collected 11 used windows in various sizes. They did not match. Some were old wooden double hungs. Some were newer vinyl. One had the etched address of a house still visible on the corner of the glass. Marcus did not care. He fit each one into the church frames himself, sealing them with caulk he traded a day of labor for at a hardware store on North Avenue. The fourth month was the breakthrough. Marcus needed water, real water. He had been hauling it in jugs from a gas station, and you cannot run a building on hauled water. He called Denise from a payphone outside a corner store. She listened to him for 10 minutes. Then she told him to come down to the city building the next morning. What Denise did took 2 weeks of paperwork. She found a hardship program for nonprofit community use of condemned buildings. She walked Marcus through the forms herself, sitting next to him at her desk and pointing at every line he needed to sign. By the end of the month, the city had restored basic water service to the church for $1 a year, a symbolic payment. Marcus said later that the day the water came on, he stood in the basement watching it run from the pipe for almost 20 minutes. Then he walked across the street to the corner store, bought a bar of soap, came back, and washed his face in his own building for the first time. Word started to spread on its own after that. A retired electrician named Mr. Booker lived 4 blocks from the church. He was 69 years old and had wired buildings in Baltimore for almost 50 years. He had heard about the man fixing the old church on the corner from his barber, who heard it from a customer, who heard it from somebody at the post office. One Saturday morning, Mr. Booker walked over with a toolbox and asked Marcus if he needed help with the electrical. Mr. Booker spent the next 2 months wiring the entire church for free. He did it the right way. He pulled permits in his own name. He met the inspector himself. He explained every circuit to Marcus, the way you would teach a son: lights, outlets, a small electric water heater, a panel that could handle a real load. When the inspector signed off, Mr. Booker shook Marcus's hand and said he was proud of him. Then he asked if he could come back on Sundays for coffee. That was when the community started showing up. A woman from the block brought a stack of folded blankets in clean grocery bags. A retired plumber named Mr. Earl spent 3 weekends fixing the bathroom in the basement and installing a working shower for free. A high school teacher brought her students by on a Saturday afternoon to help paint the interior. 22 teenagers with rollers and brushes, laughing and making a mess, and asking Marcus questions about his life and the building and what he wanted to call it when it was done. A Baptist church 3 blocks over donated 14 fold-out cots they weren't using. A furniture store on Reisterstown Road delivered a free industrial-grade refrigerator they were replacing. A woman who had grown up attending services in that same church 40 years earlier showed up one morning with a box of her mother's old kitchen things: pots, plates, a set of mixing bowls, a cast iron skillet. She told Marcus her mother would have wanted them used in this building. Someone left a hand-stitched quilt folded on the front steps one morning with a note that said, "For whoever needs it." Marcus never found out who left it. By month 9, the church had a working kitchen in what used to be the fellowship hall, 2 donated stoves, a long farmhouse table built from reclaimed lumber by a carpenter that Mr. Booker had introduced Marcus to, open shelving stocked with donated dishes that did not match, which Marcus said made the kitchen look like a real home instead of an institution. By month 11, the sanctuary had been converted into a sleeping space for families. Marcus had built privacy partitions from reclaimed wood and curtains donated by a thrift store on Park Heights Avenue. Each family unit had its own cot, its own small dresser, its own reading lamp. The stained glass had been repaired piece by piece by a local artist who refused payment. When the sun came through the windows in the late afternoon, it threw colors across the floor that Marcus said looked like a blessing he did not deserve but was going to accept anyway. By month 13, the church had a working bathroom for men, a working bathroom for women, a small medical room with donated first aid supplies, and a quiet room with 2 armchairs and a small bookshelf for anyone who needed to be alone. By month 16, the church was ready. Marcus named it the Whitfield House, after his wife. He hung a small wooden sign next to the front door that he had carved himself. The first family he took in was a mother and 2 children who had been sleeping in a car for 6 weeks. She cried when he showed her their cots and the curtain that gave them privacy. Her oldest child, a boy of about 8, asked Marcus if they were really allowed to stay. Marcus knelt down and told him they were home for as long as they needed to be. A reporter from a local Baltimore station picked up the story almost by accident. Her name was Lauren Park, and she was working on a piece about the city's family homelessness crisis. A contact at a community center told her about a man who had restored an abandoned church on his own and was sheltering families inside it. She drove out to see it on a Thursday afternoon, expecting to spend half an hour there. Lauren spent 5 hours with Marcus that day. He made her coffee in the donated kitchen. He showed her the stained glass. He introduced her to a mother who was living there with her newborn daughter. He told her about Denise and Ray and Mr. Booker and the quilt on the steps and the woman who brought her mother's pots. He told her about the night he made the decision to fix the building, and about his wife, and about the day the water came on. The story aired on a Wednesday evening. Within 3 days, it had been shared online more than 4 million times. Marcus received messages from 51 different countries. A national nonprofit offered to fund the property's long-term operations. A documentary crew from New York reached out. A city council member proposed naming the corner intersection after Marcus's late wife. What Marcus did next is the part most people don't know about. He started identifying other condemned buildings in Baltimore. He met with the city. He worked with Denise to create a formal pathway for community members to take over abandoned properties for shelter use. He spent every Saturday morning teaching workshops in the Whitfield House kitchen. Anyone could come. He taught them how to read a building, how to spot good bones under bad surfaces, how to find free materials, how to navigate the paperwork, and how to ask for help in a way that lets people say yes. In the first year of those workshops, 3 other abandoned buildings in Baltimore began the same kind of restoration. Marcus helped with all 3. He brought his tools. He brought Mr. Booker. He brought patience. He never charged anyone $1. 2 of those 3 buildings are now operating as family shelters. The 3rd is still being restored, the same way Marcus did it, 1 weekend at a time. The Whitfield House has housed more than 40 people in its first year of operation. Most of them were families with children. The average stay is about 4 months, which is the time it usually takes for a family to find permanent housing with the support Marcus and his volunteers help arrange. Nobody has ever been turned away for paperwork. Nobody has ever been asked to leave for being too poor. Marcus still lives at the church. He sleeps in a small room off the kitchen, the same room where he made coffee for Lauren Park on that first afternoon. He keeps his grandmother's Bible on the windowsill. He keeps a picture of his wife on the wall above the door. Someone asked him recently if he ever thinks about the man who used to sleep in steam tunnels and behind hardware stores, the man with the duffel bag and the broken zipper held together with safety pins. Marcus said he thinks about him every day. He said the man in the tunnels was not lazy and was not broken and was not less of a man. He said the man in the tunnels was the same man with the same hands and the same skills and the same faith. The only thing that man was missing was a building that needed him as much as he needed it. Marcus says the church did not save him. He saved himself. But the church that boarded up, condemned, pigeon-filled, scheduled to be demolished building on a forgotten corner in West Baltimore gave him somewhere to put his hands. And for a man who works with his hands or does not work at all, somewhere to put your hands is everything. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. We tell stories every week about people who built something out of nothing. The next one might be the one that changes how you think about your own beginning.